Starting with the Buffalo
It's just how it is.
Bills. We'll get to the grades in a minute here, but a review of what the Bills did here. Dalton Kincaid going number one. They traded up to go get Dalton Kincaid. Osiris Torrance, the guard from Florida, in the second round. Dorian Williams, the linebacker from Tulane, in the third. Florida receiver Justin Shorter goes in round 5. Nick Brocker, the tackle guard from Ole Miss, goes in round 7. They had another 7th rounder, Alex Austin, cornerback out of Oregon State as well.
And you can see all of this information on the PFF draft tracker, which is actually a really useful utility after the draft to get this kind of review. You get to see the pick, where it was in the round. You can do the whole NFL, or you can do by team. And you get the pick grade and the little PFF analysis in there as well. You also get kind of cool stuff, wisdom of the crowd stuff about how many people liked the pick, and also who people were picking at the time for their team when their team went and picked somebody else most of the time. So it's a pretty cool little tool to be able to use even after the draft.
That's what I'm using.
Yeah,
I'm using that draft tracker. So the Bills, I watched and listened to a bunch of the press conferences, actually for every team except the Commanders. Of the teams we're talking today.
Why do you hate Washington?
It wasn't available.
Huh.
I didn't see it. I didn't find it on the YouTube. But you get little nuggets and insights and everything. And throughout the draft process, Bills GM Brandon Beane, he answered the media on Tuesday. They do a pre-draft press conference. He said, we're likely moving back. If we're going to move, we're probably going to move back. And then there's also clips on the internet and stuff like that of when they went to go get Dalton Kincaid. When Kincaid fell, remember, a lot of us were mocking him at 15, at least in the top 20. When Kincaid fell, Beane said, we knew Dallas liked him. We knew Dallas was going to be in the tight end market. We thought we were going to move back the entire day, but he kept falling and falling. We made a move to go get him. Called the Giants. They said no. They wanted Deonte Banks. Called the Jaguars. They said yes. Bills get their guy, Dalton Kincaid, to come in to complement Dawson Knox at tight end and give another weapon to Josh Allen.
Yeah, a lot of Bills fans didn't like this pick, judging by Twitter, but I don't really care that it doesn't, seamlessly fit with exactly where their needs are in offense. I just think a guy that good is too good to pass up on. And I love the idea that they went and got him once they saw him start to slide. I genuinely think Dalton Kincaid has incredible talent and is maybe the best pure pass catcher in this draft when you fold in wide receivers and tight ends. And, you figure out how to use it. Like if your offensive coaching staff cannot work out how to deploy all of the weaponry that the Bills have, that's a failing of imagination. That's not a failing of the players that you're bringing in. So, yeah, would it be great if, there was an elite number 2 wide receiver that you love that you could put in there next to Stephon Diggs and complement Dawson Knox, the tight end who's already there? Sure, but there wasn't. So you go after a guy like Kincaid, who's just amazingly good, and you figure out how all the pieces go together later.
So how do those pieces fit? We've seen a lot of teams do this through the years. I think the Doug Peterson Eagles a few years back were heavy 12 personnel. That's one running back, but 2 tight ends, right? They had Zach Ertz, but also they drafted Dallas Goedert, and they made it work. Goddard is probably a decent comparison for Dalton Kincaid, other than maybe size, and Kincaid's a little bit more athletic, but I think Goddard's really athletic in his own right. How do you make this work? I think Dawson Knox is a solid enough blocking tight end. He's been in the 60s and 70s in his PFF grade from a run blocking standpoint almost every year of his career. He's not your big 270-pound old school hammer at tight end, but he can play in line well enough. And then Kincaid moves around the formation. And Beane even said, hey, he's not going to major in run blocking, right? He's going to major in running routes, getting open. All of the feel and the stuff that you were raving about pre-draft, you give that to Josh Allen. That is, I think, a huge win, potentially a huge win for the Bills. I understand there's risk with tight ends in the first round, all that stuff. I think potentially it's a big payout here.
That's the only problem that they have, is that neither of these 2 tight ends who you would want to deploy at the same time in personnel packages are really good run blockers, or in fact, particularly good run blockers. Dawson Knox has been fine, but he's fine in that category of we kind of keep him away from the really, important run blocks because he can't really do those. And he's good at the other stuff. But in an ideal world, if you were going to go heavy 2 tight end formations, one of your 2 tight ends would be able to go properly in line, execute legitimate blocks against defensive ends, that kind of stuff. They don't have one of those guys. So it isn't a natural fit. But, this is the NFL in 2023. To say it can't work is crazy. Like, you just have to figure out a way. It's also, I think, made better by the fact that in the second round, pick 59, they end up getting a guy who a lot of people were talking about them as maybe snagging in the first round anyway. And that happened a few times in this draft. Osiris Torrance, the guard from Florida, that was a pretty common first-round pick for Buffalo. There's a few teams who ended up drafting a guy that they were being talked about in the first round later on. They trade up, they grab a Dalton Kincaid who just has insane talent, too much to pass up on, and you're able to get a guy that a lot of people were expecting you to draft anyway a round later. When you put those two together, I think that can't have gone better.
I like it a lot. Osiris Torrance in the second because, yeah, it does. I think from our standpoint, if you asked us a week ago, they're going to get these two players. It's like, all right, how'd they trade up? Why did they trade up for a guard, Osiris Torrance? But Torrance falls to 59. Maybe the league didn't like him as much as we did, but you can see the grades on the screen if you're watching YouTube. Run blocking grade of 89.9 just last year at Florida. Over the last couple of years, he's shown he could run block both at Louisiana, at Florida. When you watch his tape, you see him when you run inside zone, those downhill types of runs, and he's comboing with the tackle, and they just absolutely wreck defensive tackles. He is powerful. He's good enough in pass protection. I think this fit Osiris Torrance to the Bills in some of their, minor pain points as one of the better teams in the league, the short yardage stuff, the stuff where it's 3rd and 3, 3rd and 4, and they're like, hey, Josh Allen, go be Superman. I think Osiris Torrance, not single-handedly, but is a very good piece to help that specifically. You're not drafting him in the second round just for short yardage, but I think it's a big addition for the Bills. And all of this stuff, all of these moves help take pressure off Josh Allen, which we talked about every single week last year. Is this Josh Allen's just going to have to take over and run and pass and do all these different things. Dalton Kincaid gets open. Osiris Torrance opens holes in the run game, and now you're allowing other people to help your Superman quarterback.
Yeah. No, I think the first two picks for Buffalo couldn't really have gone any better. I mean, again, I understand reservations about how exactly Dalton Kincaid fits in, but a guy that talented, I don't care. Like, make it work.
Yeah, so I think he could play either left guard, right guard. He'll step in, starter potential right off the bat for the Bills. And then they get linebacker in the third round. I think there's some similarities here to Matt Milano, but Dorian Williams from Tulane, the model really did like him. Flies around sub 4.5 speed from Tulane. Better coverage grades than run grades. Those are the comparisons I'm making to Matt Milano. Milano coming out of Boston College and even early in his career with the Bills, one of those guys that had a pretty consistent good coverage grade, but the run grade was kind of all over the place. But I think Dorian Williams has very good potential here in the third round.
Yeah, there's comparisons to Milano in that dynamic, better coverage than run defense. And then there's also the sort of comps to Tremaine Edmonds with serious range, serious wingspan, the kind of the length that he brings to the table and the athleticism. So it's a little bit of a composite of the two. And with Edmonds now obviously departed and gone to Chicago, it's a good guy, I think, to bring in, pair next to Milano and try and repair that linebacker core.
We'll also try to touch on some of the undrafted free agents and everything as they come up. If there's any notable names for each team, but the rest of the Bills draft, a guy like Justin Shorter, so he was one of the receivers that Anthony Richardson worked with at Florida. He showed up well. We've been working on some athleticism scores here for using game metrics, Sam, using some special technology, in-game type of stuff. Justin Shorter showed really well in a lot of those numbers for us. Brocker from Ole Miss adds a little depth on the offensive line at guard and tackle. So we're not going to go through every pick on the show. It's more like, hey, here's some notable day 3 guys and some notable UDFAs that they may have signed. Anything else stand out to you about the Bills draft, or do you have any broad overview?
I think this was a good draft. It got an A grade using the overall grades that PFF gave out on the website. I think that's fair. Like, just from the first 2 picks alone, if they hadn't done anything else in the rest of the draft, it would have been fine. It would have been a good draft. The first 2 picks, I don't think, could have worked out much better for Buffalo than they did. And Dorian Williams in the third round, I think those first 3 rounds, days 1 and 2, were basically a home run for Buffalo at that spot.